Okay, here we are wanting to insert a chart into our sheet. Uh, this is going to be a scatter plot of the data we've got here. In this case, we're going to graph arm span versus height. Typically, we are going to put our independent variable along the x-axis, and we would typically name our graph the information on the y-axis, so dependent variable versus x-axis. So arm span versus height. It's because the question we're going to ask here is, how does height affect our arm span? So if we're asking how does height affect our arm span, then height is our independent variable. So the order here would be important. We're going to title this arm span versus height. We're going to put height along our x-axis because we're asking how does height, independent variable, affect arm span, dependent variable. So to do that, we could select, if we in Google Sheets were to select this data like this, 2 columns, it's going to give us a little bit funky results. What we actually need to do is select both columns from the top. I'm going to select everything in this column. I can hold Control and select everything in this column, right? Or I can hold here, drag over to both columns. Either way, I'm selecting column B and C, and that's what I'm going to use to insert my chart. So I go Insert, Chart, and now it's giving me a bar graph that's not really what I want. We're after a scatter plot, so I can choose. It might anticipate this for you, or you might need to choose, I want a scatter plot. That looks better. So we've got our points comparing height and arm span with our independent variable of height on the x-axis. So looking good. The scale's a little funny though. All my arm span data, for example, is all falling between 150 and 200, but yet we've got all this empty space. We can scale that. We can change. We can get fancy here. And I'm going to go to Customize. We can go to Series. No, sorry. We want to change what's on our y-axis here. So I'm going to go down here to our vertical axis, and I can make some setting changes. For example, I don't need this to go from 0 to 200. I can put my minimum value as 150. When I do that, it kind of gives me a better distribution of data on my graph. I like that better. Still captures all the data there without all the dead space. I could even bring this up to 160 if I wanted to. I have no values. It looks like in my raw data below 160. I could make that change. Same thing, giving me even more use of that chart. So let's see, we've got height on our x-axis. We could edit that. We want to always include the units, for example. So our height in centimeters graphed on the x-axis. We can make any other style changes we want here. And then we were tasked with adding a trend line to that. So while we were doing that kind of manually, best guess visually, here we can be a little more precise. So I'm in my chart editor, Customize. That's when I want to go to Series. I can scroll down here and I can select trend line, and it's going to draw the best trend line through this data. And I'm looking at that, and that looks good. From that, I'd predict a positive relationship. We're moving up and to the right, and I also think it's a fairly strong relationship. I've got a little bit of an outlier here, but that's a pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I'd call that fairly strong positive correlation in that chart. Okay, and now if we move toward our homework example.